So the US has mainly had sprawling housing development for the last 75 years. There are a variety of haphazard reasons why this pattern, which involves low density, low connectivity, lack of commercial centers, and segregated land uses, has prevailed. And many researchers have studied the consequences of sprawl on things like health, social capital, and crime. So we were interested in how sprawl is related to intergenerational mobility, because intergenerational mobility and economic opportunity for kids can reduce the negative effects of inequality and low income. Other researchers had already explored the relationship between intergenerational mobility and sprawl between cities, but we were interested in how sprawl affected economic opportunity within cities at the neighborhood level. More sprawling cities typically have greater disparity in school quality and higher segregation, while in more sprawling neighborhoods, it's harder for kids to access resources and for important social mechanisms like collective socialization to take place. As adults, jobs are harder to access in more sprawling neighborhoods. And so if we can understand how kids' interactions with their neighborhoods is related to their economic opportunity, we can come up with some targeted policies for how to help poor kids get out of poverty and improve their situation. So to study this issue, we used observational data from the Opportunity Atlas to compare intergenerational mobility in sprawling and non-sprawling neighborhoods and cities. The Opportunity Atlas has average outcomes at the tract level and city level for kids from different economic backgrounds. So with this, we can see how kids do compared to their parents in the relative income distribution and see if kids had the opportunity to improve their position. And then we controlled for variables like income, school quality, demographics, and social capital. We put this all in a multi-level model with random slopes and random intercepts. Multi-level models are the appropriate model when you're using multiple nested observation units, like neighborhoods within cities for your variables. And then to correct for heteroscedasticity, we use bootstrap standard errors, but it's generally an observational study. So sprawl at the metropolitan level involves, lots of leapfrog development and suburban development. So people are driving cars everywhere. But at the neighborhood level, it kind of looks the same. So generally, when you're trying to walk around within your neighborhood, it's really hard to get from one street to another. So, you may have long curving streets where there aren't many connected sidewalks compared to a more dense neighborhood or less sprawling neighborhood would have a lot of opportunities for people to get where they need to go quickly. We found that sprawl was negatively related to upward economic mobility at both the city level and the neighborhood level. And even in a dense city, if a kid lived in a sprawling neighborhood, they faced worse mobility. And in sprawling cities, they did worse too. And we saw that the neighborhood effect was really important. Regardless of the level of sprawl in the city, if someone grew up at a tract in the 10th percentile sprawl, so very low sprawl, rather than the 90th percentile sprawl, which is very high sprawl, their expected annual income was $2,864 higher, which was almost 10%, or a few percentage points in the income ranking. However, the same didn't hold for kids from higher income families. In high-income families, kids in sprawling neighborhoods did slightly better. And the problem with this is that there's an incentive for high-income families to move to the suburbs and continue with sprawling development, despite the kids overall do better when there's less sprawl at the city level. So you could think of this almost like a common pool resource problem, where compact development is a resource that helps many children, but for many individuals, the private benefits are greater for sprawling development. So individual interests result in a socially suboptimal outcome. This study isn't causal and doesn't prove that sprawling development is the cause of bad outcomes for intergenerational mobility. However, the relationship likely implicates a number of problems associated with sprawl as affecting mobility. So for instance, sprawling areas are often broken into smaller municipalities, which means that a number of resources like community centers and parks that you have are more dependent on the income of the immediate residents. So the importance of these results is that people, particularly high-income people, may not naturally choose to live where the development pattern is best for society. That means that local city planners and officials need to consider the broader social implications and choose zoning patterns and regulations that are best for all residents. Particularly trying to reduce sprawl and increase infill development may have a long-lasting positive impact on children's economic possibilities. We probably can't turn Atlanta into New York City, but we could shape neighborhoods to be built for everyone. And additionally, we could try to reduce the negative effects of sprawl by increasing connectivity with, increased transit and finding mechanisms to spread funding throughout metropolitan areas. And that might mean creating laws and regulations at a broader level, like regional governments or states, where the influence of a few high-income people is less binding. Community development needs to consider the kids in these communities and what their opportunities are.